Today we're going to be talking about arguably the most popular scale for guitar players. And I'm going to walk you through some of its uses from beginner to pro level. And be sure to stick around to the very end of the lesson because I've got a free gift for you and your guitar that you're going to love. Now first let's talk about why is the pentatonic scale the most popular scale for guitar players? Well, for one, it's very commonly used by legendary guitar players that we know and love. And second, it's a scale that can reward us a lot quicker with melodies and licks because of the way the intervals are laid out, compared to, for example, the major scale. Even though that is the most important scale in music in the sense that everything revolves around it, as guitar players, especially for wanting to get into soloing, when we learn a diatonic scale like that, the way the intervals are laid out, it just makes it a little more tempting to just go up and down the scale, just ascending and descending, which isn't musical by itself, that right there is just exercising a scale. It's not really creating music or melody. And the pentatonic scale being made up of 5 notes means we cut out 2 of the notes from the major scale or the diatonic scale, which is made up of 7 notes. And just that small change makes it easier to create melodies. Okay, so let's get into how you would use the pentatonic scale if you're a beginner. So we're going to start with the most popular pattern of the pentatonic scale. We're going to use the key of A minor for this example, right? So we're going to be starting with minor pentatonic, and we'll get into major pentatonic as well. So starting on the 5th fret of the low E string, right? And then we have the 8th fret. We're going to do 5th fret, 7th fret on A, 5th fret, 7th fret on D, 5th fret, 7th fret on G, 5th fret, 8th fret on B, and 5th fret, 8th fret on high E. So this right here being our root note, which is A, it's laid out in a minor tonality. Now check this out. We can take this same pattern if we wanted to adapt it to, let's say, a major key, right? All we'd have to do is just switch the root notes from the low E string here on the 5th fret to the 8th fret, which is going from A to C. And if we play that exact same pattern that we just did, but we're putting emphasis, right, on that C note there. We're essentially using the same notes in the A minor pentatonic, and they happen to work over C major. And what that's hinting to us is the relativity between A minor and C major. Essentially, those 2 chords are relatives of each other. So A minor, right, to find its relative major, that would be C major, and C major, its relative minor, would be A minor. So all you really need to know with that is that the same notes in the scale work over both chords because they are relatives of each other. I'm going to put on a quick loop and show you an example. It's going to start with minor and then move to major and back. So right there you could clearly hear how the same exact scale I was playing worked over both of those chords, but its tonality would shift depending on what chord I was playing over. So you got a bit of a darker, sadder sound, over the minor chord. Very bluesy and expressive, right? Then when it would switch to C major, right, you would just get more of a happy, brighter sound. So my advice for beginners learning this scale and using it to improvise solos is to avoid going up and down the scale just like that. Instead, break the scale up. You can actually divide the scale into 4-note groups, like, right, the first 4 notes, then the next 4 notes, then the next 4 notes. And what you can do is just kind of consider those 3 separate boxes where you can just play a little lick, and then move on to the next one and play another lick. So that way it sounds more, like there's intent behind it rather than just going up and down the scale mechanically. Now for the intermediate approach to using the pentatonic scale, we're going to be combining major and minor, but using two separate scale patterns. So essentially we're going to be paralleling between minor pentatonic and major pentatonic over just one chord. So if we're still in the key of A, we already know the A minor pentatonic, right? We're going to find the major pentatonic pattern that's in the exact same neighborhood and overlaps right on top. So that major pentatonic pattern just so happens to be 5th fret and 7th fret on low E, 4th fret and 7th fret on A, 4th fret, 7th fret on D, 4th fret, 6th fret on G, 5th fret, 7th fret on B, and 5th fret, 7th fret on high E. So in context, right, so it's right on top of the minor pentatonic. So having the major and the minor pentatonic scale patterns in the same neighborhood on your fretboard makes it a lot easier for you to weave back and forth between major and minor tonalities. Now my tip for intermediate guitar players when you're improvising a solo and wanting to weave back and forth between major and minor pentatonic, think of it like a call and response thing. So you can, let's say, play a phrase that's in minor pentatonic, then follow it up with a phrase in major and just kind of alternate. So that way it just seems a little bit more intentional and not like you're just playing, you still don't want to get caught in the trap of going up and down a scale, just up and down a minor and a major pentatonic scale right in the same area. It's still very easy to fall into that trap. So you still want to stay melodic, you still want to have intent behind the notes that you're playing. So start there, or even kind of follow a formula where it's like maybe you'll do 2 phrases in minor, 1 in major, and then the 4th one in minor, similar to how vocals you're usually done, So I'm going to go ahead and play over another loop and show you what I'm talking about. So that example was just demonstrating that call and response thing I was talking about, where you're just like doing a phrase in minor, then doing one in major, and then if you kind of alternate that way, it actually makes for a coherent solo. At least, I think it's coherent anyways. Now moving on to the pro usage of the pentatonic scale, this is where it's going to get really interesting. This is where we're going to actually incorporate some jazz sensibilities, which is something I almost never do. And that's just to show you how serious I am about this being a pro usage of the pentatonic scale. We're actually going to be dealing in modulating over chord changes, particularly a very popular sort of jazz chord progression. And on top of that, it's going to be something that deals with outside playing, which seems like it's this lofty, crazy thing, but it's actually really simple when you break it down. And hey, real quick, if you're getting a lot of value out of this lesson, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. It really helps us out and lets us know that you're digging the lessons and allows us to keep bringing more to you. All right, now let's get back into it. So a really popular chord progression in jazz is what's known as the 2-5-1 progression. So you may have heard, like in blues and rock music, the 1-4-5 is really popular. Also in genres like country music, it's extremely popular, but in jazz, their version of the 1-4-5 is the 2-5-1. So if we're in the key of C major, let's say, where our 1 chord is going to be a C major 7, that's our 1 chord, right? Our 2 chord, right, which would be a D minor, that would be the first chord in the progression, and then because it's a 2-5-1, the second chord would be the 5th chord, right, which would be a G, but in jazz we like to play 13 chords, so it would be G13 and then C major 7. So the 2 and the 5 and the 1 are right there. Now here's where it gets really interesting. So you're actually able to use the pentatonic scale in a way that modulates, so it kind of like changes keys where it follows with each chord change. So starting with the 2 minor here, right, that D minor, we can actually play what we already know as the A minor pentatonic scale, but it also, because we're in the key of C major, right, it's the exact same scale as C major pentatonic, right, remember? But we're going to actually use this over the 2 minor chord. It's kind of a different sound to it. You can sort of hear the context when we're focusing on that chord as opposed to the 1 chord. Makes it sound really interesting. All right, and then this is where it gets really interesting. We're going to be playing that 5 chord, right? That G13. Here's where we're going to be modulating or changing the keys of the pentatonic scale. We're actually going to be moving up chromatically by 1 fret. So moving from what we know as that C major pentatonic, we're actually going to be moving it up 1 fret. All right, so we've gone from that C major pentatonic to now C sharp major pentatonic. And that's supposed to work over the 5 chord. But it's going to sound really weird and almost off, but in a way that's not like dissonant. It's just strange. And this is where the outside playing comes in. And what's cool about this is even though this is like some pro level stuff as far as playing outside the box, right? What we're doing is essentially timing it right. So we're playing this, this sharpened pentatonic scale, right? It's sharpened, brought up 1 semitone, right? Or 1 fret here, only over the 5 chord. This is where it's important to really pay attention to what chord is being played. And since we just have those 3 chords, that's all we got to think about, right? But then once we're playing that over the 5 chord, we're actually playing what's called an altered scale, which means it's technically out of key, which is the outside part, right? But it works as long as we time it to where we only play that scale over that chord. And of course, we're going to go even further and in a way that kind of resolves and brings the whole thing home. And here's what's happening. We're going to be going 2, 5, 1. So we're doing 2 chord over here, 5 chord over here, 1 chord over here, and that's what's going to create this really interesting sound. So check this out. I'm going to play a 2, 5, 1 loop in that same key and show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to let the loop go 1 time where we're just listening to the chord changes, and then we'll go into playing. So here we go. There's a 2 chord, 5 chord, and there's the 1 chord. All right, so we just got to make sure we time this right. Here we go. Now, I'm not a jazzer by any means, but I love being able to pull off situations like that where I have a jazz chord progression and I can just do that cool chromatic thing and it happens to work while including some outside playing so that I can pass myself off as knowing what I'm doing. Now, the interesting thing about playing outside, all it is, it's not like there's some like, space age scales that only exist in some pocket dimension that we just invoke when we're trying to play outside. All outside notes are just wrong notes, but played at the right time. So for example, being able to play in that altered tonality over the 5 chord was pretty much our little window during that progression to do something simple, which was just move that pentatonic shape, right, up 1 fret, and you could even just walk up the scale, like in a way that, made sense and kind of resolved into the next chord, but it just made it sound so outside while still, sounding right. It didn't really offend, the ears or anything like that, hopefully. But it was just enough to pass off as, oh, I meant for it to sound like that. It's just, it's jazz. So in the future, whenever you find yourself playing over a 2-5-1 progression, no matter what the key is, just start with the 2 chord with like the main scale, which let's say if we were in a different key, let's say we were in B flat, right? B flat major. So you would want to play B flat major pentatonic over the 2 chord actually, right? So, and then when you have the 5 chord, you take B flat major pentatonic and then bring it up 1 fret to B major pentatonic, right? Right, just weird sounding. And then of course when it resolves to the 1, Then you just go 1 half step or 1 fret above that. And that's kind of where it gets a little modal, you know, it kind of invokes the Lydian mode in that sort of sound. So you're getting major pentatonic sound, you're getting altered sound, and you're getting modal with it at the same time, which, I mean, is basic ingredients for pulling off playing jazz. So those are some of the ways that the pentatonic scale can be used throughout different levels, from beginner, intermediate, to pro level. And at the end of the day, one thing that it tells you is that the pentatonic scale never gets old, no matter how good you get. And if you ever find yourself getting bored of the pentatonic scale, spoiler alert, it's not the scale's fault. It's a little bit of tough love I'm going to give you. What's most likely happened is you've just exhausted your own ideas in using the scale. So if you feel like you can relate with that point, one thing that you can do to kind of break the habit is just take what you normally do when you start playing the pentatonic scale and just don't do it. So for example, if the first thing you do when you play A minor pentatonic is, right? Just don't do that. Do something else, right? Do something like if you tend to start in the upper register of the scale, start in the lower register of the scale, you know? And even just kind of play almost a random assortment of notes, like something like that, right? Like I had no idea what that was gonna sound like until I just decided to pick random notes. It actually sounded kind of cool. Let me see if I remember that. That's awesome. So that already sets me on the right path to coming up with new ideas. And speaking of new ideas, what if I told you that there's a system that can allow you to create infinite musical ideas and have full-on comfortable navigation of the fretboard in any musical key? Well, it just so happens that free gift I was telling you about is that system. What you're getting today is a free copy of the Fretboard Conveyor Belt. This has helped thousands of guitar players online learn how to navigate the fretboard comfortably and confidently, playing in any musical key and creating musical ideas non-stop with minimal theory involved. So be sure to click here to claim your copy or check the link in the description box. And with that said, I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. I'm Eddie with Guitar Mastery Method, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.